Physical therapists. Who's your most memorable client? I've been doing physical therapy for 6 years now, and I've seen all kinds of patients. But there was this one guy, Mr. Garland, who still keeps me up at night sometimes. He came to me after a massive stroke that left his entire left side paralyzed. 67 years old, quiet as a stone, and absolutely refused to even try walking again. Not that he couldn't do it, he flat out wouldn't do it. Every session was like pulling teeth. I'd ask him to lift his arm, and he'd just stare out the window. I'd suggest we work on his balance, and he'd shake his head. "I don't see the point," he'd always say, in this defeated voice. At first I figured it was depression, which happens a lot with stroke patients. But then I started noticing weird things. Whenever I mentioned his family or asked about visitors, he'd flinch like I'd slapped him. He kept 0 personal items in his room. No photos, no cards, nothing. One day I suggested we do exercises so he could play with his grandkids again, and he snapped at me so hard I almost jumped out of my skin. "Don't you ever mention them again," he said through gritted teeth. After 2 months of absolutely 0 progress, my supervisor called me into her office. She told me to close his case, said we were wasting time and resources on someone who clearly didn't want to get better. But something about the whole situation bugged me. So on my day off, I decided to do some digging. I looked up his name online, searched through old news articles, court records, anything I could find. That's when I found the story that explained everything. 5 years ago, Mr. Garland had been a high school history teacher, 32 years in the classroom, teacher of the year twice, the whole 9 yards. Kids loved him. Then one day, a 15-year-old student named Ashley accused him of making inappropriate comments about her appearance. Said he'd called her into his office after class and made her uncomfortable. The school district didn't even wait for an investigation. They fired him immediately. His daughter stopped speaking to him. His neighbors avoided eye contact. Local news picked up the story and ran with it. His entire reputation got destroyed overnight. But here's the kicker. 6 months later, Ashley admitted she'd made the whole thing up. She was failing his class and thought if she got him in trouble, maybe the new teacher would give her better grades. The school district quietly cleared his record, but by then it was too late. Nobody apologized. Nobody wanted to hire the guy who'd been accused of inappropriate conduct with a student, even though he was proven innocent. His teaching career was over. His family relationships were ruined. He became a pariah in his own town. The next morning, I walked into his room with a stack of printed articles. The original accusation, the investigation results, the student's confession, everything. I didn't say a word, just left them on his bedside table and started setting up for our session. When I came back an hour later, he was sitting up in bed reading through every single page. His hands were shaking as he held the papers. "How did you find this?" he asked without looking up. "I figured there had to be more to your story," I said. "People don't just give up on life for no reason." The next day, when I walked into his room, he was already trying to lift his left arm on his own. Barely an inch off the bed, but he was trying. From that day forward, everything changed. He wasn't fast, and he wasn't enthusiastic, but he started participating. He'd do the exercises, follow instructions, push himself a little harder each week. After 3 months, he could stand up from his wheelchair. After 6 months, he walked the length of the hallway using a cane. His physical progress was incredible, but what really got to me was watching him come back to life emotionally. One rainy Thursday morning, after a particularly good session, he was sitting on the edge of the therapy table catching his breath. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "You know what you did for me?" I shook my head. "You reminded me I'm still a human being. For 5 years, I felt like I was walking around with a scarlet letter on my chest. You're the first person who bothered to look past the accusation and see who I actually was." That was our last session together. He was transferring to a facility closer to his daughter's house. She'd finally agreed to see him again after years of silence. I never heard from him after that, but he left me a handwritten note on his last day. All it said was, "Thank you for not giving up even when I did."